10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 264. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 264 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Wonderful to have you back with us for yet another episode. And this month we are going to continue our series on rhythmic flexibility. And we're going to talk about things from a little bit of a different angle this month, talk about some different time signatures. Should be really fun, and I'm looking forward to presenting this material to you. Before we jump into the episode, as always, wanted to give a shout out to our new Patreon members. If you're not sure what that is, this is a listener-supported show. You are the people, the listeners, that make this show possible. We do not have any advertisers on this show, and we depend on you to kick us a little bit of money every month, and in return for that money, you will get fantastic rewards, including PDFs for every single episode that we've ever done, along with audio examples and all sorts of other fun stuff. So if you'd like to join up and become a Patreon member and supporter of this podcast, please go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and you can check out all of the different levels and rewards. So I got to thank some new people that have joined up this week. Thank you to our new $5 patrons over at the site. Thank you to Jorn, Jose, Barbara, and Espen. Thank you so much for signing up, becoming a part of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. And of course, as always, thank you to the hundreds of other people over there that are supporting us each month. Could not do the show without you. So again, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today for instant access to all those materials. All right, so let's get back into our rhythmic flexibility series here. So what we did last month on episodes 1 and 2 of this series is we talked about this exercise where we took a regular old bebop line, an eighth note line, and every iteration we added value to each note. So it went from an eighth note all the way up to a dotted half note. And what that's going to do is that's going to force you to kind of accent different parts of the measure. It's going to force you to be flexible. Every time you go through that line, you're playing with a different note value. And that really changes things. That really forces you to think outside of the box from just playing eighth and quarter notes. So in the exercise that I have for you today, we're doing much the same thing, but we're going to change up the time signature, and that is really going to throw you for a loop. We're going to put an exercise in 3/4 instead of 4/4. And one thing that I find with a lot of my students and even myself is that they don't and I don't spend enough time practicing in 3/4. So that's what we're going to be focusing on in these episodes, these final 2 episodes of the series. We're going to talk about developing rhythmic flexibility in 3/4. So if you want to pull out your PDF, and we're going to do a very, very similar exercise to parts 1 and 2, but now we're dealing with 3/4, and the note values are going to be a little bit different. So before we listen to it, let's just identify what we're doing here. So I've got this little 4-measure eighth note line, again, a little bebop line, and we are going to start stretching that out. And every iteration, we're going to play a little bit longer of a note, but this is going to have completely different connotations than last week because of the way that 3/4 interacts with these different note values. So here's the original line that we're starting with, the eighth note line. So it goes by pretty quick, but when we start to increase the value of the notes, it's going to get stretched out a lot. So what do we do first? We go from eighth notes to just regular quarter notes. This is going to be an extremely easy transition for you to go from those eighths to those quarters. It sounds like this. So that should be pretty simple for you. Now we're going to change it to dotted quarter notes. And this is where we start to get into a little bit more interesting of a rhythm. So when we were doing it in 4/4 and we were doing dotted quarter notes, it changed where the note fell from measure to measure. So it was a really interesting thing. It remains very interesting in 3/4, but when you use a dotted quarter note in 3/4, it takes up exactly half of the measure. So what this is going to result in is like a 2/3 kind of feel. We are going to split each measure in half, and after you play a number of these, you start to almost hear the 2 more than the 3 in your head. And this is a fantastic thing you can do when you're playing over something in 3/4, is kind of superimpose that feeling of 2 over the top of it. It sounds like this. So can you hear that too, like starting to sort of creep into the feeling where if you're constantly splitting the measure in half, you're constantly creating a feeling of 2. It's almost like the brain sort of splits halfway in between 3 and 2. A very, very interesting sound. So now what we're going to do is we're going to play 2 beat notes for each pitch in the line. This one is really interesting because what this one does is it sort of forces the next note to come in much different parts of the measure. We have a tendency in 3/4 to like always kind of hammer the downbeat, and this is going to break you of that habit, because when we're doing 2 beat notes and we're in 3/4, you can see by looking at the example starting in measure 22 that the different notes land on basically every beat of the measure, and it's constantly changing. So you're going to have to learn how to kind of accent every beat in the measure rather than just beat 1. If you're counting through the first couple of measures, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So it's going to develop a lot of flexibility for you as you play through using these 2 beat notes, but doing it over a 3/4 time signature. It sounds like this. So that's a great one. That one may force you into a little bit of an uncomfortable situation, but that's what this is all about, making you uncomfortable so that you develop new skills and you learn to play in new parts of the measure. The next part, starting in 36, very, very straightforward. We're just playing dotted half notes, and in 3/4, that equals an entire measure for each note. So this one should be very simple for you, very self-explanatory. Here's what this one sounds like. So I'm not thinking that you're going to have much trouble with that. Just turn on your metronome, set it to 3, and obviously you're just starting each note on the downbeat. One of the cool things about this exercise is it gives you a little break, right? You play one really hard rhythm that doesn't line up perfectly, and then all of a sudden you're into another rhythm that actually does line up logically with the beginning of the measure. Gives your brain a little bit of a break. Okay, then we're going to finish off the exercise for this week by playing 4 beat notes. So each note from the line is going to get 4 beats. This one is my favorite one. It's also, I think, the most difficult one, because now your notes are really landing on a completely different part of the measure each time. It's getting pushed back by 1 beat basically every time. And every 4 measures, it's actually going to line up, right? So it's a 4 measure cycle of starting on the downbeat to starting on the downbeat again. But during those 4 bars, you really have to make sure that you're listening to the metronome to make sure that you are starting each note on the appropriate beat. So here's each note lasting for 4 beats over a 3/4 time signature, and this wraps up our exercise. So you can hear that one is very, very interesting because it's kind of like you're fighting against the metronome, right? The metronome wants you to aim everything for that downbeat, and it's giving you that different sound of a click on beat 1 to tell you like, please land here, please land here. But if you can fight against that urge and actually get comfortable doing something different than what the metronome is kind of pushing you into, that's where you can develop that really awesome flexibility. And it allows you to just have so much variety in your playing and not be afraid of landing anywhere in the measure. So I think this one will be pretty challenging for you, but I think it'll push some of you to actually start working in 3/4. In fact, I've been working on a bunch of tunes in 3 after coming up with this exercise because it's done the same thing to me. I do not practice in 3/4 enough. So what I'm going to do at the end of the episode is actually string together everything in one go so you can hear the entire exercise played at once. And then I want you to turn on the metronome, work on each section individually until eventually you feel like you can play through that entire 3-page exercise. I've been using 160 BPM for this episode, but certainly do it at whatever tempo feels comfortable to you. Okay. Now remember, you can grab that PDF by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up, and you have instant access to that PDF and every single one that we've ever put out on the show, all 264 episodes. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Remember, you can get in touch with me on the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group, or you can shoot me an email with any questions at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. I also wanted to throw in there real quick that I do have a YouTube channel. If you go on YouTube and you search for Nick Maynella, you can find my YouTube channel. A lot of the listeners of this podcast are subscribers over there, and I hear those people are chiming in with comments on the videos. And we talk a lot about jazz stuff over there as well, just in a bit of a different format. So if you're looking for even more material, we have a ton of it over there. Check it out today. Just go on YouTube, search for my name, and you should be able to find my channel. All right. Hope you're all doing well out there. Had a ton of fun with this episode. I'm going to play through the entire exercise for you now, and we'll see you next week with a brand new episode. Hope everybody is staying safe and healthy out there, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.